Hey YouTube, this is Mr. White here. I'm going to be doing, after many requests, I've had many people ask me to do this for some reason. I'm going to do a discussion on prime movers in Garrysmod. Now, this has been done before by a couple people, namely Big Adam. I'm not trying to outdo Big Adam by any means. I'm just trying to perhaps give more of an update to the video because there have been some advances in like timing and just build quality and technique since his video was made. So I have narrowed down the choices for prime movers in Garrysmod to 4 different prime movers. And there are many variations on all of these, but I think that these are the four bases by which all the others expand from. So coming over to the first one, this is a forcer engine, as I'm sure many of you all know. Basically, you send a value to a forcer, and the forcer acts upon a wheel and spins it. You can get good torque and speed out of these. I mean, they're very simple to make. You don't really need to know all too much about wire. Very few moving parts, and they're pretty good for just about anything you need a prime mover for. So I press the button, the RPMs slowly spool up. I didn't want to make it too powerful, so that's a forcer engine. Nothing fancy. Moving on, these are the piston engines. These are very rarely used anymore. There's been a small resurgence in the use of them after a tool came out called TB's duplicator, which allows near perfect duplication every single time. Most of the time. Sometimes it messes up if you parent incorrectly. So something just popped up. Anyways, TB's duplicator came out. You can parent perfectly. Yada yada yada. There are 2 ways to time a piston engine. One is using angles, and I prefer a GPS method where the expression reads off the GPS and gets an angle. But there are many other ways. There's beacon sensor and gyroscope timing. Gyroscope timing is not recommended nor endorsed by me because you can't really flip the engine around, and it's not good for planes or rock crawlers or anything that needs to climb a steep angle, because the engine will start, or the engine timing will mess up and the pistons will start to fire at odd times. It's just not really good. And then the other type of timing is ranger timing, which again I do not recommend, partially because rangers are laggy because of how they detect when they're on and off, and basically I have just a wheel back here with a ranger on it, it spins, yay, fun. How I've built these piston engines is a little different than probably some of you have seen. I've actually built the entire contraption within a box, and I did that with the fading door tool. I've faded it out. Basically, there's a wheel and a piston with a slider inside an actual prop. I mean, there's no real opening in there, just they're all no-collided and anything. And I was inspired by the work by Carbine and Winston, who were doing this before I was, quite a ways before I was. I don't know who started it, but they have YouTube videos. You can search them. I don't care. But pretty much in a piston engine, you have a piston moving up and down based on either angles or the position of a ranger, acting on a crankshaft, in this case a wheel, and driving the engine as a whole. They're pretty difficult to make unless you know what you're doing. I mean, I can whip one up in about 5 minutes pretty easily. That'll run pretty decently. Timing can get a little complicated depending on how many pistons you have and what the angles are and everything. If you're using rangers, it's a lot easier, but rangers tend to lag, and they're pretty slow, which you'll see pretty soon. But aside from that, I recommend piston engines. They're just nice. They're traditional, they look right, they're realistic, yada yada. So with an angular timed piston engine, because it's one cylinder, there is a dead spot in it. But my pistons are firing. They're pulling and pushing, which is pretty commonplace now. As you can see, the RPM's about 300, just cresting 300. The Ranger piston engine, let me just spin it up. There we go. You'll notice a difference in RPM, hopefully. So this one got up to, it's still climbing at about 330 right now. This is getting up to about 180, and it will top at like 180, 190. And that is because of the slowness of the Ranger. Rangers are slow in Garrysmod. They haven't really been optimized, and there's no real easy way to optimize them in the source engine to make them run as fast as angular detection on a wheel. So again, I recommend angular timing for piston engines just because it's a faster faster way to do it as far as resources go for your computer. I mean, it's not as hard on the CPU or GPU to keep track of. Rangers, they're much easier because you're just placing them on a wheel where you want the piston to fire. So Rangers are easier, angular timing is better. I'll shut those off. A variant on the piston engine, which is gaining in popularity, is the hydraulic engine. Basically, it uses a wire hydraulic to act around a wheel. Again, I'm building inside a box. Act around a wheel, providing useful force. Hydraulic engines are not particularly great for their speed. I mean, they get up to speed just fine, but then when you try and put them on something happens, and they don't go as fast as they could. They will still go very fast, but they're much better for torque. They will provide immense amount of torque at low speed. That's really just about it. I mean, it's pretty much the exact same as a piston engine, except instead of a piston with a slider and a rope, or a slider and a prop, depending on how you build it, you just have a hydraulic pushing and pulling based on the angles you use. Now, a hydraulic engine can be timed with angular timing fairly easy if you know what you're doing, and it can be timed with Ranger timing, but it gets really, really difficult. So anybody who's building a hydraulic engine, just time it with angles, because it's going to be a lot less of a headache than timing with Rangers. Because with Rangers, however easy it is, you have to have hundreds of inputs and everything, and it's just bad. So we will fire this up. Now this is on extremely low power to keep the RPM down, because the RPMs will get very high just due to the torque of the engine. Nice thing about these is that there isn't too much of a dead spot. The dead spot in a single-cylinder hydraulic engine is very, very unnoticeable, just because it doesn't matter what position on the wheel the hydraulic is. It will keep pulling at the same amount, sort of like a forcer engine way over there, but it's a little more realistic. So we'll shut that off. Okay, variant on the piston engine is the slapper engine. Slapper engines are by far the most popular reciprocating engines as of yet, I think. They're pretty much, they replace the piston engine in a way where you don't have to use sliders. This was created, I believe, out of the necessity for a non-slider piston engine that wouldn't lag too bad. And these fit the bill. They do what they're supposed to. Basically, you have the swinging arm here that is accessed at one point right here, and then a rope farther down the lever that works on the wheel, and a piston on the other side. I have built this one to produce more torque than speed, and how you do that is, it all depends on the position of the thruster, in which case my thruster is way out on the very, very end of the lever, providing quite a bit of leverage, and the position of the rope connecting to the crankshaft. The closer to the axis, the fulcrum that you put it, the more torque you will have, because the piston has to travel farther to move a certain amount. The farther out, you're going to have better speed because it's a lot more responsive, but you're going to have less torque. But even now, this has approximately double the torque, I think. Yeah, this would have just about double the torque of a piston engine using the same force piston. and the same amount of stroke for the crankshaft. I don't really like these too much. They're kind of weird when they run. They just look kind of floppy, and they can get really floppy if you don't set your constraint weights right. And even so, this is the heaviest engine out of all of these prime movers. Let me turn this back on. Out of all of these prime movers, this is by far the heaviest. The flywheel weighs like... no, the flywheel weighs the same, but the crankshaft weighs about double of all of these. And then the bar and the thruster make up the piston, and that's about 3 times as heavy, just to get it to not flop around, and even so, it still flops around quite a bit. So we will turn that on, and we'll start up. So RPMs aren't going to be great, but they're going to be decent. But you're going to have a bunch of torque. It's going to be pretty hard to stop this engine compared to a thruster engine. Hydraulic engine still has it beat. I mean, hydraulic engines just produce an immense amount of torque. So yeah, that's a slapper engine. Now, there are many variations on all of these engines. If we go back to the simple little forcer engine, which has now been made even simpler by all of these, you can have multiple forcers along this wheel to balance it out. If you put a forcer in the top right and the bottom left, then it's fairly balanced. They have a tendency to torque the vehicle depending on the weight or whatever you're putting it in. They have a tendency to torque everything around. But there aren't too many variations. I mean, you're pretty much just adding forcers or placing the forcers inside the wheel, just as long as you get the forcer to contact the wheel. Thruster engines, like piston engines, not too many variations really. I know that Carbine and Winston have engines where instead of having one crankshaft with pistons in line, I should have made a demo for this, but instead of having one crankshaft with the pistons in line, they have one crankshaft per piston, or one crankshaft for 2 pistons, and multiple crankshafts all bolt socketed together, so they can have an inline engine of, say, 6 or 8 or 16, I think they got, cylinders in line with the vehicle, and not have to use gears to transfer the motion 90 degrees or anything. Hydraulic engines, not too many variations. I mean, there's some timing variations in which you can either change the length of the hydraulic to achieve the actuating to move the engine, or you can have a fixed length for the hydraulic and change the constant, which is a setting on the hydraulic, sort of like an elastic. You have constant and damping sent to the hydraulic that determines the elasticity and strength of the hydraulic. And you can set these through wire, and if you set the damping to 0 and you change the constant, then that acts as sort of a throttle. You could just change both of them and have, twice the efficiency of the engine, but whatever you want to do. And as far as the slapper engine, not too many variations. There's some sort of swing piston engine sort of thing going around that I'm not even going to try to understand yet until it becomes a little more mainstream. But not too many variations on this. I mean, they're used so much you can't really improve upon it all too much anymore. So, that pretty much concludes the video. If you have any questions, just ask them down in the comments bar. Feel free to message me through YouTube. If you need really anything from this video, I'll be supplying links to any of the mods that I used. I mean, it's PHX, Wire, and then I'm using Lexical Tools, improved fading door tool. But that's pretty much all that I'm using. I mean, it's pretty vanilla stuff now that PHX has been added to Garrysmod. So thank you for watching, and get to building.